Hello and welcome to NewsClick. We are talking today with Ambassador Ramirez, the ambassador from Cuba in India. Ambassador Ramirez, thank you very much for being with us. The first thing that has raised a lot of curiosity is the fact that in the 1980s, after the changes in the Soviet Union and East Europe, Cuba faced a very difficult situation because it lost its major trading partner, especially in the area of food security and their ability to provide food for everybody. How did the Cuban people and the Cuban government get out of what was at that time a crisis?
Well, I have to say, first of all, that with a lot of effort, and it took us some years to come out of those difficult years of strong economic hardships that we faced. But we did it because there was a strong connection between the people and their leadership. So people was aware that if we were lacking some food, even the minister or the vice president, whoever, was having the same difficulty. So we shared totally, and we were really connected. And there was a clarion call those years that Fidel gave, that was socialism or death. And everybody gathered around that call. Of course, we had to introduce a lot of economic reforms in order to survive and to save socialism, but because that was the major issue, that any reform that we would take would not affect the socialist principles of the Cuban Revolution. And we did so with a lot of effort, but we were able to survive and come out of that crisis.
And specifically in the area of agriculture, earlier Cuba was really dependent on export of sugarcane, and so large parts of agriculture was really dependent on sugarcane production. So how did the Cuban agriculture policy change in the face of the changing circumstances?
During those years, indeed, as you have mentioned, we had a strong dependency on sugar production, and therefore agriculture, particularly because we had a lot of very favorable agreements with the Soviet Union and socialist countries. Most of the agricultural products were imported. Therefore, we had to change the paradigm in Cuba. We even changed the property, the proportion, the distribution of the land in Cuba. And during the 90s, it came to a point in which 75% of the land was in private hands or in cooperative hands, while state farms were only 25% of the lands. So we started introducing reforms to make agriculture much more productive. Still, those reforms and innovation are taking place because of the present economic international crisis and the US blockade and 3 devastating hurricanes that we faced in 2008. We are still depending on a lot of agricultural imports that we want to get rid of.
So what are the major innovations in agriculture that were introduced?
Well, in the 90s, we introduced what it was called the urban agriculture. That was a strong innovation, and it was based mainly on green concepts. Those concepts, which at the beginning came to us out of necessity, because we were not able to import fertilizers, then became a way of life, and it's part already of the strategy of the Cuban government to promote green agriculture wherever it is possible. Because sometimes you have to be objective and not necessarily everything you can do with green agriculture, but we have done a strong effort in urban agriculture in order to get vegetables and other produce to the people close to them and in quite amount and with good quality. That has been a strong success in the Cuban agriculture. Now we have a second process, which is developing suburban agriculture, sort of rings around the cities, in order to reduce transportation, the loss of wastage of food produce to reach easily to the city. We had a strong transformation in the production of milk and distribution of milk in Cuba. In the past, we had a very bureaucratic system in which everybody collected milk. Milk was transformed, was conveyed to a center, and then redistributed again throughout the nation. That has disappeared, and now there is a strong connection between producers and the local villages where they live, and they distribute directly. That has been very successful, but still many more things have to be done.
And Cuban science has always been, at least for developing countries, something to look up to. Are there also areas in biotechnology that you're exploring to improve the prospects of Cuban agriculture?
Indeed, so in fact, we have already introduced some varieties to increase the resistance to pests. We have introduced a variety that increase production of the crops, and not only in that sense, but also in the way in which farmers work the land with new techniques in order to be more successful. Sometimes coming back to the roots. Some areas we are applying again the auxins, not because of we are going back in history, but because sometimes when you use tractors, you compact the land, and what you produce later on is much less. So sometimes you have to go to the roots to go for the future.
That was the first part of our discussion with Ambassador Ramirez. Do join us for the second part.